This session is conceptual. It's all about how Claude Code interprets instructions, and it includes small prompt snippets. And of course, it clearly warns about the failure modes and stays anchored to this AI slide deck generator project. One of the most dangerous assumptions people make with the Claude Code is that it understands what I mean. Well, Claude Code doesn't understand intent the way a human teammate does. It just interprets instructions, context, and constraints. And when any of those are missing, it fills the gaps on its own, sometimes correctly, sometimes catastrophically. So this session is about learning how Claude decides what to do when things are unclear. We talked about that our Claude Code is optimized to be helpful. That means it constantly tries to infer your goal, predict future needs, and improve the code base beyond what you explicitly asked. This is only great when your instructions are clear. We are in a period of major transition right now. In the early days of white coding tools, they didn't ask clarifying questions when you gave them a command. They simply assumed. Because of that, prompt engineers had to explicitly instruct these systems to ask questions and produce a plan before making changes. Today, that behavior has shifted. Most of the time, tools like this Claude Code and similar systems operate in a far more agentic mode, taking initiative rather than waiting for detailed guidance. And this is great. Now let's look at a simple example in the context of our AI slide deck generator. The weak prompt that you can write is something like this. Improve how slides are generated. This prompt tells Claude almost nothing. Should the API change? Should prompts be modified? Should caching be added? So Claude does what it's designed to do. It explores possibilities, not the intent. Now we can have a better constrained prompt. For instance, we can say improve a slide generation quality by refining the existing prompt template. Do not introduce new services. Do not change the request flow or a data model. We have the same goal, but a different outcome. Claude interprets instructions in a layered manner, or simply said, through ordered decision rules. Basically, it prioritizes instructions roughly like this. System-level constraints, it's all about tooling, the environment, and a project-level rules, which is, in our case, claude.md file, but we don't have it yet. And then current prompt instructions, then existing code patterns, and inferred best practices. So if your prompt conflicts with a claude.md file, claude.md usually wins. If your prompt is weak and vague, Claude falls back to inferred best practices. This is why a project-level guidance matters more than clever prompts. So when you say something like add XYZ feature, Claude often hears design a future-proof solution. Unless you explicitly constrain scope, you will get new abstractions, extra files, configuration layers, and refactors you didn't ask for. So advanced prompting is how you turn off that default behavior. All right? So at this point, we can say that advanced prompting is not about longer prompts. It's about precision. For instance, you can say add a new slide layout option, implement it within the existing layout switch. Do not refactor unrelated code. This is far more effective than a long paragraph that never defines boundaries. So precision tells Claude where it's allowed to think. One more thing that you need to know about Claude Code is that it's highly sensitive to framing. Consider this difference. You might say a refactor, a slide, a generation, logic. Or you could say something like this, which is more precise. Make a small localized improvement to slide generation logic without changing structure. The first phrase opens the door to architectural changes. The second one, this one, quietly locks that door. This is why professionals don't use the word refactor casually. It's not a tweak, it's an invitation. Now, let me give you a key warning. Claude will not protect your architecture. Claude will not stop and say, this might break your app. That responsibility is still yours. Claude Code is a multiplier. If your instructions are disciplined, output is disciplined. If your instructions are sloppy, problems scale faster. Now, let me give you a little exercise. Take this prompt. Add analytics to track slide generation usage. Now you need to pause. Before typing anything into Claude Code, you need to ask for this. Where should this live? What must not change? Should this affect runtime performance? Is this a production-ready or temporary feature? Now you need to rewrite the prompt with explicit constraints. So let's fix this prompt together. Here is the updated prompt. It says, add lightweight production-ready analytics to track slide generation usage. The analytics logic must live in a dedicated, isolated module or service and must not modify existing slide generation logic, data models, or APIs. Do not introduce new dependencies or architectural changes. The implementation must have negligible runtime overhead and must be safe to run in production. If analytics cannot be added without violating these constraints, stop and explain why. This is the mental habit that separates people who fight Claude Code from people who control it. In the next session, we'll introduce claude.md, the single most important tool for shaping how Claude Code behaves across your entire project. And we'll prove it by modifying the same codebase with and without it. If there is one file that determines whether Claude Code feels professional or chaotic, it's the claude.md file, the markdown file. This is the control center. Well, here, this blog is a bit old, but has enough information for you to understand what it is. However, at this current moment, full-time web coders are saying one claude.md file is not enough. There should be claude.md file, architecture file, change files, and many more. Using various documentation files is actually helpful in the long run, but it uses a lot of your tokens. So in the starting point, it's better to utilize this one claude.md file. After you get some experience, you will start creating your own custom documentation files. So basically, the interesting part is that most people either don't use it at all or they turn it into generic documentation that Claude mostly ignores. Both approaches waste Claude's potential. So in this session, we'll treat claude.md file for that what really is. It's all about control layer, a safety system, and a set of guardrails that Claude follows before it ever reads your prompt. Every time you start a Claude Code session, Claude reads that claude.md file first, before your prompt, before your code, before any tool output. That means it shapes every response, it applies to every task, and it persists even when you clear conversations. This is why claude.md is more powerful than any single prompt you will ever write. If you have already created the claude.md file, you need to just delete it, not because it's bad, but because this file is often built wrong. We'll rebuild it from scratch so you understand what actually belongs in it, what doesn't, and why each line exists. And this mirrors real-world projects where claude.md evolves over time. Now let me open my web browser back again. So in this blog, it says that we can start with this /init command. So this command automates this process by analyzing your project and generating a starter configuration. So it basically creates this claude.md from scratch by analyzing your project. Here it says Claude examines your code base, reading package files, existing documentation if it's available. And yeah, that is pretty cool. So what we're going to do, we're going to type that command. Here it also says, I'll run this init command. So /init. Okay, this happens. Let me just log in one more time. Yes, I have the account. I'm going to click authorize. All right. We're back. So let's try one more time. Okay, searching for a pattern, reading one file. So now it's going through the whole project. We're inside the My Project folder. So I'm pretty sure it will analyze both server and client folders. You can also see how many tokens we're using. Yes, this is giving us a warning that OpenAI API keys is exposed. But in my case, that API key is already expired. So when we try to test this application in the upcoming sessions, I'm going to be using a new API key. You want to create claude.md. And here I'm going to select yes, or you can select this one. So this allows all edits during this session. Press enter. It seems like it's ready. Okay, this says created claude.md file. Let's open that. Claude.markdown. All right. So this file provides guidance to Claude Code and working with the code in this repository. So we have development commands. I think it got this from our README file because we have some documentation right here. And then for the architecture, it says monorepo with 2 independent NPM projects, server and a client. So Express API and the client using React app. The client proxies API requests to this port in development. Okay, so we got the server. It is creating the metadata about the scripts that we have in the server side. Here on the client side, we have source folder, and inside it, we have hooks, we have services, and a main app.js, which is the root component. It also checks server health on mounts, renders editor, plus a preview layout. And it also created this data flow, which is awesome. So user writes uploads Markdown in the Markdown editor. New slides generates slides. Server parses Markdown. If AI enhancement requested, content is processed through AI servers before parsing. Then client receives slides array and renders via this slide preview. So the key conditions is that slides are separated by this horizontal rule in the Markdown source and API response format, themes with various types. And at the end, we have environment variables. Here you can see we're using OpenAI API and also Llama for text enrichment feature. Well, at this point, if you're asking what happens without this Markdown file, claude.md. Well, without this file, Claude relies on inferred best practices, the patterns it sees in the code, and its default helpfulness bias. This often results in unnecessary abstractions, architectural changes you didn't ask for, files being moved or reorganized, and assumptions about scalability or features. Well, none of this is wrong, it's just uncontrolled. Well, you might be thinking, we have everything ready now. What is more to it? Well, the answer is project boundaries. You can manually write the project boundaries by yourself. Also, you can just write a prompt for Claude itself to create for you inside this claude.md file. So let me open my terminal. For instance, here I'm going to type add a project boundaries section to claude.md listing what's in scope versus out of scope for this AI slide deck generator web app. Now run this command. You should see updates inside this file. Okay. I think that's it. So we have project boundaries, in scope, out of scope. We can read this. So it's listing the rules that we have. And for the out of scope section, the app is a single user with no login, user application accounts or sessions. There's nothing related to this. For the database, there's no persistent storage. Slides live in React state, exports all ephemeral files, clean up after 24 hours. So these are all the rules that Claude follows now. So with this project boundaries, we can capture project truth and non-negotiables. Now, the next thing that you need to add to this claude.md file is environment effects. Well, Claude Code cannot guess your environment reliably. This is where you state facts, not preferences. For instance, if you're using Redis, you need to say Redis is available locally at this localhost with this port. Moreover, you can say no cloud services are used in development. The app must run without external dependencies and stuff. This prevents Claude from adding hosted services, introducing config layers you don't need, or solving problems that do not exist. Well, at this point, we have this architecture, the project services that we have, the data flow, and the key conventions, and then environment variables. Now, I'm going to add the environment facts. Now let me open my terminal. Here I'm going to type add an environment facts section to my claude.md file. Use PowerShell commands only. Do not use bash, okay? Because we're inside PowerShell instance. And then we could say detect only the tools relevant to this project. It could be OS, could be PowerShell itself, like PowerShell version and Python version, for instance, then Node.js version. And for the deployments, it could be also a Docker version. And then do not scan for unrelated tools like Go, Rust, Yarn, or Ruby, etc. Then write the results into a clean section while also preserving any existing content in the file. Now let's send this. So we'll probably ask some permissions from us. Okay, some PowerShell command errors. It should fix that itself. Here, I'm going to go with the second option. There we go. It says done. Let's see the file. So as you can see, we have environment facts, and these are the tools that we need for this project, for instance. Well, our claude.md file is getting much more advanced with this information because every time we run new commands in the future, Claude looks up to this file so it won't break things easily. Moreover, this file is not static. Anytime you correct Claude twice on the same thing, notice a recurring mistake, or add a new non-negotiable constraint, and that belongs in this file. Over time, claude.md becomes a memory layer, a quality gate, and a way to compound improvements without changing models. Now let's briefly talk about common mistakes with this claude.md file. Turning this file into onboarding documentation is wrong. Making it too long is wrong. Forgetting to update is also wrong. And using it as a substitute for planning is also wrong. Claude.md is not where you solve problems. It's where you prevent bad ones. The key mental model is that prompts control what you want right now, and claude.md controls how Claude behaves all the time. So if you skip this file, you're voluntarily giving up the control. Moreover, I'd like to briefly show this part from this blog. So it says, keep context fresh. So working with Claude Code over time accumulates irrelevant context. You can use /clear between distinct tasks to reset the context window. And this removes accumulated history while preserving your claude.md configuration and Claude's ability to address new problems with a fresh context. Well, overall, you can do a lot of cool things with this markdown files when you're using Claude. So in the next session, we'll learn about scratchpads.
Thanks for watching. If you like this, you'll love Zenva Academy. 300 courses where you learn AI by building real apps. Links in the description.